Welcome to the Beyond the Bucket Show, a podcast centered around optimizing all life's buckets. We all have buckets we are balancing: coaching, entrepreneurial ventures, family, passion projects, and health. Let's all take this journey together and become bucket fillers. And here's your host, Chris McSwain.
Welcome back to another fantastic episode. If you don't know, March is International Women's Month, and we have a fantastic woman on today's program, been a coach and administrator and doing so many great things for not just women, all people that are playing sports, and we're excited to have Willette White on the program. Welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to spend some time with you.
Definitely. Likewise. We got to get to know a little bit about each other via email, and then obviously jumping on the pre-call, which has been great, but I can't wait to dive into this. But before we start, Willette, why don't you tell all the listeners one fun fact about yourself that even if they knew you, they might not even know?
Wow. I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is that I spent 36 years at a high level in women's basketball, and 26 were in the Pac-12 conference. And when I basically grew up in that conference, and when I started, it was the Pac-10.
Right.
And then I was able to be at a university that was the 11th and 12th member coming into that Pac-12. So it's like my baby, and the fact that it's no longer is like devastating for not just me, but for everyone who just loved the Pac-12 conference and worked in it. But I spent 26 years there, so it's quite heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, what a fantastic conference, the Conference of Champions. If you've ever heard Bill Walton do a game, but so many different memories. I remember. So one of my former players, the dad was actually on the quarterback of Cal back in the big game where the band was on the field. So he shout out to Dave Stivers. He is now the CEO of Pebble Beach, but he was the quarterback on that, or one of the quarterbacks on the team, and he tells the story quite well of those memories. But just so many different championships, so many different great things from the Pac-8 to the Pac-10 to the Pac-12. So yeah, what is your fondest memory of your time with the Pac-12?
Wow. Gosh, the two that come to mind have to deal with Stanford, because Stanford women's basketball really is the barometer, right?
Right.
I was at the University of Washington, and we were in the top 20 also. I'm sure Stanford was in the top 10. Not sure really where we were both ranked, but we had a sellout arena, and there were people sitting in the stands or in the aisles. And the fire marshal had threatened to shut the game down if people didn't move. So they went to different places, standing room only, sellout crowd. We ended up beating them. It was a highlight.
Wow.
And then, the other event was I was at Washington also and had beaten Stanford at their place on a last second heave-ho. And I mean, all those heave-hos in the end at the buzzer are exciting. So right. I definitely remember those two incidences.
Were you around with Mike Neighbors at all when he was at Washington?
It was before that. So I was at Washington from 85 to 93.
Okay.
And then I went down to UCLA for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the year 2000, I went to Northeastern University in Boston.
Yeah.
After Northeastern, I came to the University of Oregon for 3 years. I took a couple of years off right after that, and then ended up at the University of Utah for 8 years.
Wow. So which school? So you weren't in any of the Arizona schools. You weren't in any of the LA schools.
UCLA.
Excuse me. USC,
Yep.
Arizona State. Those are the few that you haven't been a part of. Colorado, they came a little bit later too. Wow, what a phenomenal career. So, I guess that's a good segue to giving us a little bit of background about you. Where'd you grow up? How'd you get to where you got to, and what were all your different steps? Not just coaching, not just administration at each one of those stops. If you can do it in 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in the state of Washington,
Yep.
and I went to a junior college. And out of that junior college, I was recruited to the University of Idaho by Tara Vanderveer, who's now the head coach at Stanford. So
Mm,
that was my connection into the world of women's basketball. I went after I graduated from Idaho. Well, she had left my senior year. So after I graduated from Idaho, I went and worked as a graduate assistant at Ohio State. So that's really where my coaching career began.
and
After
not
Ohio
and not
State,
and not to cut you off, but that's where Tara went as well, right? She went from Idaho to
absolutely.
Ohio State, then to Stanford.
Yeah. So I followed her to Ohio State for 2 years. My first job out was at Iowa State for 9 months. Didn't really dig the Midwest. Came back home to the University of Washington and was there for 8 years. And then
Wow.
I went down to UCLA as associate head coach, and then kind of some other places. But I've had longevity at almost every place I've been, with the exception of Oregon, where I only had 3 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And not to cut you off again, because I want you to continue with your outline or timeline. But what has been the biggest difference that you've seen in the game from when you first started coaching till where we're at right now with the women's game?
Oh my gosh, the investment, the resources, the demands, the expectations, you name it, it has changed. The transfer portal, the NIL, all of these things that didn't exist when I first started. And it was so, I look back and it feels like almost archaic back
Mm,
in the day to where
yeah.
we are now, to how we can communicate, how coaches can communicate with student athletes, and just all the rule changes and the little less travel than what we had back then in the month of July. So many changes, Chris. It's beautiful to watch, but it's also sometimes a little challenging to watch
For
because
sure.
money is so important, and that's
Yeah.
really ultimately why the Pac-12 is no longer in existence.
Right. And you have to follow the money to anything. And obviously the big conglomerate is always been football. And so, institutions are going to go where the revenue is um, being derived from. And so I think that is the biggest thing. But just to touch on women's basketball right now, it has never been more popular than it is right now, which I love for the women's game. Being a girls' high school basketball coach, it brings a smile to my face that the women are now getting their just due. For so long, it's only been about the men, 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 men. But now, look at the women's Final Four that's getting ready to come up here. It is going to be more watched than the men's Final Four, which is crazy to say, but you can actually really get invested with the female athlete now because you see them for multiple years and the stories. The Caitlin Clark stories, the Juju Watkins stories, the Cameron Brink stories. Them and you've seen them. The girls from LSU, the girls from South Carolina. You see the coaches in the limelight, and the way the coaches are dressing on the sidelines. It brings great enjoyment, and that's really what it is. It's really entertainment, and I think that finally everybody has kind of embraced that level of entertainment. And on top of that, the level of play is on another level right now. These girls have been playing so much, and the game is still relatively in its infancy. If you think about the WNBA, just had 25 years a couple years ago. The NBA just celebrated 100 years, and just the difference between, or excuse me, 75, one of the two, I forgot. But I wish I had a fact checker on the podcast at all times. But just to see where the women's game is, I'm just so happy to be a women's basketball coach, and I know that probably gives you a lot of joy too.
It is amazing to watch. I mean, in some respects, it's about time, but in other respects, the fact that so many universities are investing in women's basketball has created this parity and comes with parity comes really, really good competition and excitement and, you know, the rivalries and so forth. And then companies that finally started to really dive in and embrace that. And I think you're so right to hear the stories about young women, Juju Watkins and, Cameron Brink and Angel Reese and, and watching them being so successful in the NIL department is really, it's incredible. It's incredible what's happening. Um, it'll be interesting as time goes on, the teams that have left the Pac-12 for other conferences, what that will look like for them, for the
Right.
other sports, not necessarily football and men's and women's basketball, because they'll be able to charter everywhere, but the other sports and how that impacts them.
Right. And I believe there may be some guidelines on the Title IX that may be changing too in the next year or so. And how does that impact? Will they be more like club sports? I've heard things where the West Coast schools are going to be more like Ivy League schools, where scholarships are, there won't be full athletic scholarships, but they might have academic opportunities or academic aid to fund some of these athletes and things like that. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because you're so focused on the main, quote unquote, main sports, but what does that actually do to a rowing, a crew, water polo, just all the other sports that go along with it. So it's going to be some really interesting times. And I'm not the one making any of the decisions, but hopefully the person that is in charge, or the people that are in charge of this, handle it with a lot of care, because this could be good, or it could be really bad for a lot of athletes.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Just to see what the future holds is it the demise of some levels? Is it the demise of some programs? We don't know, and time will tell.
Yeah. What are some interesting things that you've learned from Tara Vanderveer as you were around her for, for a large part of your career?
Yeah, I think Tara is so she's very black and white, not a lot of gray areas. She really has her culture and her system, and they don't deviate a lot from what has gotten her to where she is, and that's an all-time winningest coach. Um, she is not just the college coach, but I think they're comfortable with her as a human being also, right? And I don't want to say as a friend, but Tara, it's important for her to have personal relationships, and that's been really obvious along the way. Um, she just eats, sleeps, and drinks the game of basketball. Maybe not so much as she gets older and has, great people around her who
Right.
do those things for her, but she has always been such a student of the game and learning from, the greats of Bobby Knight and other people that she has followed, Pat Head Summit. And she will tell you, she'll be the first to tell you she has stolen things along the way, and that's what great coaches do. They pick and choose from, what they've seen along the way and develop their system and who they are as people and as coaches and their environment and culture. And it's just been amazing to watch the trajectory of her career.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing with anybody that is great is going to have a high level of consistency over a
Right.
period of time. And so for her to win her first title in the 90s, and then her most recent title in the 2020s, that just goes to show you the level of consistency that you have to have over a long period of time. We're talking about a decade upon decade upon decade being one of the top, and that's got to really put some strain on you. And as you think about like your own career, what has made you remain so consistent and be at such a high level at a lot of different prestigious places, and how have you been able to sustain that level of output over the years?
Well, I think first and foremost, the relationship was really, really important to me. I didn't always vision this profession about the X's and O's and the wins and losses, but it was about the relationships and the people I met along the way and the former players that are still in my life to this day. And some of them are my best friends to this day. So I think the relationship was always really, really important to me. Um, I also think just sort of the drive to make, as an assistant coach, it was my job to make our head coach better, right?
Mhm.
To go out and get the people that would best fit into our system and to, manage and navigate and help young women to grow as people and as better basketball players too. But yeah, I think first and foremost, the relationship piece is really, really critical to sustain 36 years in this business. I think you have to have that as a piece
For
that's
sure.
important.
What's one thing that sticks out to you as far as when a player uh, came back and said something to you multiple years later that you may not have understood the impact in that moment, but you took away for like, wow, this is the reason why we do it. Was there any moments like that for you that have taken place throughout your career that you can speak about now?
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with a young woman, and we were just sitting next to each other on the plane, and I just started asking her about her life and her family, and she was able to share some really personal things. And at that moment, I remember it distinctly. Not only was I like in shock of what transpired for her, but the
Yeah.
fact that she would share that with me. And it was at that moment that I realized that I needed to be more than just a basketball coach to these young women. I
Wow.
needed to be able to care about them as people and to make sure that um, they knew that and that I had expectations of them as they would be entering into the real world in 2, 3, 4 years, whatever that was. So I think at that moment, I realized that it was more than just about the wins and the losses.
And especially as an assistant coach, you can bring so much value because the head coach is obviously the one that's in charge of kind of everything that's going on, but the assistant coach can be that voice of reason. I mean, I think back to my playing career, I was much closer to most of the assistant coaches than I was with the head coaches. And that was because they were that buffer between the head coach and the player, because the head coach has to be the ultimate account. Think of it like a aunt or an uncle or a grandparent or whatever.
For sure.
Like when it's not your kid and they're still part of your family, which assistant coaches and coaches and players, it's really a family. And so when you look at like going to stay at my cousin's when I was young, I remember that, and you kind of get to be free for that night or that weekend. I just think of those same things when I think about assistant coaches and their roles in these lives, because nobody does it alone. I just got a text from a mom. Her daughter's in college now, and she just finished her freshman year, but she played for us in high school and grew up playing club basketball with us in high school as well. And she was talking about how great of an experience she had. They're getting ready to go to the NCAA tournament in her first year, and she's very, very excited. And I was like, well, thank you for keeping me updated and whatnot. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to know you guys as a family and know your daughter. And she says, Chris, it doesn't happen alone, and everybody that comes into our lives has a piece in this. So that's why we continue to share the way we do. And that was everything for me in that moment, because sometimes you might not understand the impact that you have right then and there, but when you can remove yourself from it and you get that feedback from later on, this is a couple years in the making, it just feels really good and fulfilling, and knowing that this is not a job, like you mentioned, this is a calling. And I firmly believe that.
Yeah, yeah, that was so perfectly said, Chris. The times that you get your Christmas cards in the mail or you get a text and happy birthday text or whatever it might be, you're just reminded of the impact not only that they had on your life, but hopefully that you had on theirs. So,
For sure. And especially when like when you guys are in your position, I have a lot of friends that coach college um sports, not just basketball, but football and baseball, and there's just so much pressure that goes on for these coaches, even the assistant coaches. Like, we're getting ready to go to the Mountain West tournament, and we know some of the coaches that are coaching in it, but the level of stress in these games and the margin for error is just very, very slim. And so you're living and dying literally with all these possessions, and March is coming, or March is here. So those last second shots, like you guys had at Washington, those are going to be happening, and lives are going to be changing. And so when you can just have that perspective, because you can't have that perspective when you're just in it. You just can't. You're just so locked in and dialed into winning. And if you win, you're elated. And then sometimes it's like more of a relief. And then if you lose, whether you lose by 1 or you lose by 25, it's just devastating because you put so much energy and effort toward this one thing to win this basketball game, which ultimately doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of life, but it means everything for you in that moment.
oh, you're so right. It's like, it's everything that you work for, right? And
Mm,
so either losing those close games or even talk about recruiting, you put time and energy into a young woman for 2, 3 years, however long you've been recruiting them, and they decide to go somewhere else. Or they come to your place. And so the highs and lows are so significant. But to have longevity, you sort of have to figure out how to not only have some balance, but to keep things in perspective.
what are the things that you would do if you guys lost a big game or you lost a prize recruit that you thought for sure was coming? How did you bounce back from something like that?
Oh gosh, it is really devastating because you almost take it personal, right? Because you develop these relationships and then you're wondering why that relationship wasn't strong enough. But in reality, there's other reasons. It's not just about you. So I think keeping that in perspective helps you move through it a little bit easier. And that, young women and young men make decisions that they believe are best for them. And we've lost kids to, a Stanford or a Oregon or whatever. And yes, it is devastation, but you have to move on because you
Mm,
have to find the next person that's
right.
going to help you be successful.
And we're only as good as the players that we have. If
Yep.
you don't have good players, there's only so much that you can do. I feel like good coaching can win you 2 games throughout a season, and I think good players can win you the rest of them. If
Yeah.
you don't have good players, it doesn't really matter how much you know as a coach, because I could know way more than the next coach, but if they've got a team of 12 kids that are just really, really good, and I got a team of 2 or 3 kids that are really good. Well, we already know what's going to happen. And if we switch teams, the same thing would happen. So the talent has always been something that people look for. And if you have talent that is coachable, that is hardworking, that is dedicated, that is selfless, then I think you can have a really good program. It's the kids that come in that are selfish, and kids that are only worried about their numbers, and
Hmm.
kids that don't really want to buy into the system and the program. That's where you kind of have issues. How did you guys steer away from that when you guys were recruiting kids to get the right kids in the building for you guys and your systems?
I think getting to know a young woman on a different level is really, really important. Getting to understand her why. I think
Mm,
once you know their why, because young people do it for a variety of reasons, right? They either, are passionate and love the sport, or maybe they want to get their college education paid for, or maybe they're doing this because it's something that their parents really, really want them to do. But I think understanding their why is so critical because it makes all the difference in knowing who they are as a young woman. So I think that's really critical. But like I think about your situation at the high school level, and you don't get to always choose who is going to play for you. So
Right.
how do you manage kind of the different challenges and egos that you experience at the high school level?
Yeah, it's tough because, like you said, you're not in control of who comes in, and our situation is a little bit different. We're a private school, but our private school is almost $34,000 to attend, so there is some barriers to entry when it comes to that as well. But we can also take kids from 30 miles away to 50 miles away if they wanted to make the
Mm,
commute, or people that are right down the street. So we just try to get the kids that want to be there, and if they want to be there, hopefully, the financial situation can work out for them if they're in need of aid, and they qualify, great. And some people, they don't qualify either, and so those are some of the things that you're kind of dealing with. And I just think every school or institution, whether you're at a public school, a private school, a big school, small school, everybody has different issues, and you got to work with the people on your campus to make sure that you fill the spots that you can get. I've been blessed to work with great people at my school, and yeah, I come to work and I love every bit of it. But everybody's going to have their challenges, and you just got to kind of navigate through whatever those challenges are, because you may look at this other school and say, oh, this and that, and you may think that they're so far above as far as attracting and getting all the top talent, but you never really know what the situation is either. So I try to just focus on what we do, and hopefully if we make it attractive enough for a kid to want to come play at our school, great, because it's not just about basketball for us. There's so much more. And for most of the kids, they're not going to play in college. The kids that do want to play in college, there'll be opportunities to do that at our school. But we just want to get the right families in, the people that are committed, and people that want to work hard and buy in. And that's kind of what we've done. And we've done that at a high level for the 11 years that I've been there, and they've done that before, and hopefully they'll continue to do that after I'm done as well.
yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. So talk about the landscape of, so things are kind of shifting in regards to freshmen getting ready to go, or incoming seniors going to be freshmen at the next level. First of all, a lot of freshmen that are really good are not getting the opportunities that they once did because of the transfer portal, as you mentioned earlier. But also on top of that, the backlog in COVID, which gave everybody an extra year. I think there's kids that are like 26 years old that are still playing their respective sport, which I think they should, and that's a great opportunity to continue to get their education, but it also takes away from opportunities for other kids. So what is your I guess philosophy on incoming freshmen, and just kind of the dynamics that they have to go through that a lot of other kids their age didn't have to?
Yeah, the transfer portal has just created less opportunities for young women and young men coming out of high school. Um, a lot of college coaches are recruiting out of the transfer portal because if you can get a kid with a year or two or even 3 years of experience under their belt, why wouldn't you? So that does limit opportunities for young women, but there's still opportunities out there, and that's what I think um, that sometimes they miss. There's many of levels. Sometimes a young woman is D1 or bust. So you're missing great opportunities at the D2 level, the D3 level, NAIA, whatever. So there's plenty of opportunities out there, but it's a waiting game in some ways for young women and young men until a university does what they need to do out of the portal. Then you'll find out if you have opportunities. Like I'm working with some young people now, and I think it's a waiting game in some respects, because most colleges are going to look at the portal first, and then what they get out of the portal will determine if you're still in their realm of possibilities. So I think first and foremost, the transfer portal has created and limited opportunities for young women, but there's still many opportunities out there. And you have to be intentional about it's not just getting out and playing AAUs anymore or being out on the July circuit. There's more to it. There's plenty of other things that you can do for a young woman to get noticed, and that's really advocating for yourself and really, you know, getting in touch with college coaches and sending them information and all of these things that are out there. So, um, yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. So give me some specifics on what a student athlete can be doing to be an advocate for themselves and give them an opportunity to play at that next level.
Yeah, I think recruiting means so much, so many different things. Again, it's not just going out to these camps and tournaments and so forth, but it might be, the kid that goes unnoticed or doesn't have the opportunity to play AAUs. There's, the ability to reach out and send highlight film, which can garner some interest, and then sending game film. So now you can send a whole game film and they can see your mistakes. I always liked watching game film and not just highlight film. Highlight film could reel me in, but I would want a game film after because I want to see how they react to the mistakes they've made or their demeanor on the bench or their relationship to their other teammates and so forth. So many things to look at, but I think reaching out to different places that you might have an interest in and maybe finding those schools that have your academic interest and then narrowing it down from there and do you want to go away from home? Do you want to stay close to home? I think it's also assessing what's important to a young woman. Um, Big school, large, small school, all of those things really have to go into consideration to find the best fit for a young woman.
For sure. And I think self-awareness as well.
Yes.
If you're averaging 5 points a game in high school, the likelihood of you going power five or now power two
Yeah.
uh,
Right.
is very unlikely. So you have to really be so far and above the competition that it is evident the level that you're supposed to be at. And if there's any question in as to what level you are at, that college coach is not going to recruit you. And those are some of the harsh realities of what you deal with as coaches, or if you're a parent. Like you have to have some realistic expectations. You can be a really good high school player. You could average 12 points a game, and you might not have any interest. And one of my friends talked about this on the podcast, several months back, but it's basically like real estate. You have to think of it like that. And if there's a lot of action going on, that means your value goes up. So if you live in a neighborhood and all the houses are going for over $1 million, well, and you're on that block, well, of course, then you're going to be going for over $1 million as well. That's the same thing when it comes to the recruiting. A lot of the questions that you get asked from college coaches are, who else is recruiting them? And if you say, oh, well, we got this and this and this, or no, we have Stanford, we have UFC, we've got Oregon, we've got Colorado. Oh, okay. Well, now you've piqued their interest even more because now they're more valuable. But if you can't say that, you're not going to get that opportunity. And for high school kids, if you're not in the top 100, it's going to be tough for you to go Power 5 out of high school or Power 2, like we've been talking about. It's just not going to happen because you're just not that good. And sometimes you have to be able to tell people that, and you may not want to tell them to it like that. You can frame it in a different way. Well, you have to be better, I guess, would be the different way to frame it. But yeah, it's just so difficult to make it to the Division I level right now if you're not a top level 4 or 5-star athlete. It's just very, very difficult.
And I think you run into, and you said this earlier, you run into the reality and not all parents see the reality, or not all
Mm,
kids see the reality. So yes, having those harsh conversations, but even having harsh conversations and they're still focused on Division 1 or bust, you almost have to sit back and let them figure it out on their own if they're
right.
not willing to kind of open up their mind and their world to Division 2 or Division 3 or NAIA. They're hell bent on Division 1, and you don't think they're a Division 1 athlete, then the harsh reality is going to come hitting them quite hard.
Yep. And me as an athlete, I didn't go Division 1. I had to actually go JC first, and then I got an opportunity to play at the next level. But I never
Yep.
played Division 1, and that's okay because most of the people didn't even play in college.
Yeah.
So when you get those opportunities, you still got to take them. And look at the guy from Tennessee. He started out. He started out. I forget his name. Dalton, maybe is. I believe is his name, but he started out at a junior college because he was only 6'3" at the time. He did well at the junior college, and then he went to a smaller school, I believe, Northern Colorado. Played really, really well there, and then he is now 6'6", 6'7", and he's the SEC Player of the Year this year. He transferred to Tennessee, and he's a top 10 team in the country. But like you said earlier, it just takes some time and some patience because you might not be there at that moment. But if
Mhm.
you just wait and if you continue to grow and continue to blossom, you might get that opportunity at that next level. I do want to ask you this because this is like, are you worried about college athletics at all right now? Because what is going on is basically there's starting quarterbacks at one school. They will leave and go to the next school right away. Like it's just crazy what's going on, and you can't blame them because if somebody was offering me money to go to their institution and it's more money than what I'm making now, it's no different than a capitalistic society that we live in. If I have an
Yeah.
employer and they're offering me this, and then this other employer is offering me this, well, I got to have a real conversation with me and my family. It's like, well, this is a significant increase in our, in our livelihood. And for these kids, it's got to be really difficult to sift through all the stuff that's going on. So are you worried about college athletics?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I will have to say that being outside of it, I'm less worried because I am a spectator now, right? So, if I were in the midst of it, I would be more worried. The inability to really establish relationships because a young woman or young man's going to be gone in a year, or you get someone in for a year for their senior year, and it's very different than being a part of their lives for a 4-year period. So I'm definitely worried about the landscape of college athletics, and the conferences, and the rivalries that are no longer, and all of these things, and the NILs and the money, and somewhere something's going to crash and have to be rebuilt potentially. I don't know, but I'm just sitting back and watching, basically.
So if they
And
gave
being
you
a
the
part of I'm sorry, and being a part of the young women who are going to their respective universities, we really have to have deep, intimate conversations about the landscape of college athletics.
so if somebody gave you the keys to run the Collegiate Athletics Association, what would you do first?
Oh gosh, I think that's such a good question, and I don't know if I have an answer to that. But I really am so distraught about um, the changes in the conferences. Like, we've got 4 teams from the Pac-12 in the Big Ten. We've got 4 teams from the Pac-12 in the Big 12. We've got 2 teams in the ACC. We've got, Oregon State and Washington State still trying to figure out, the state of their affairs, and nobody cares about anybody anymore. So I think not having those regional conferences is so depressing for me. So I think first and foremost, I would address that. And I don't know how because I know it's about the money. Um, So yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer for that.
Yeah. And from the outside looking in, it looks very much to me like the AFC and NFC, where you have two big conferences, and they're you're kind of gonna play in this little pocket, play in this little pocket. We'll all come together, and we'll see who the
Yeah.
best team is at the very end. But back in the day, it used to be like a 10-week season for college football, and then you get to bowl games, so they would get an extra one.
Mhm.
But now they're playing championship games. They're playing, 2 to 3 rounds in the college football playoff. And then I think it's going to get to where they're playing 15 or 16 games. And if it's really about a student athlete, then you're more concerned with their well-being, them playing so many more games. Like if you just played 5 more games a year, like for a career, that could be up to 25 games if you stay for 5 years, or 20 games if you stay for 4 years, or 15 games. Like that's
Right.
15 games is a whole extra season if you take into account like everything. So yeah, I don't have a right answer either, but it sure does look like, all right, here's the AFC, here's the NFC. I don't know what they would call it in sports, but again, everything is derived around football. And then basketball would be the secondary sport. But what's going to happen to a sport like baseball or
Yeah.
softball? Where how is Stanford going to go play Stanford's going to the ACC, correct?
Mhm. Yes.
How are they going to go play Louisville? How are they going to go play Miami, like on a weekday, and think that's better for student athletes? It's really crazy. Now football is not that bad because they do that anyway. They're
Right.
going to play. They're going to play in Texas now. They'll go play in AT&T Stadium, and it's only a once a week type of thing. So even if you had to travel, if you have 12 games and you have to travel 6 games, well, 3 of them might be close and then 3 of them might be far, but it's not going to be like back to back weeks where, like, if it's basketball, you might have to play Arizona, then you got to go to Louisville, then you got to go to Miami. Like, wow, that's crazy. Yeah, the more and more I think about it, it's just going to be wild to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, I think scheduling is going to be really important for the conferences. They're going to have to get creative in how they do it, whether it's pods or, I mean, there's so many teams in the Big Ten, right? And the ACC, whether they do it pods, and now UCLA and SC and Oregon and Washington are still, playing twice a year. So you still have those regional matchups and rivalries, but they're going to have to figure out something. I can't imagine Stanford going back to play, Virginia on one Virginia and somebody else on a weekend, and then turning around and going somewhere else the following weekend back east. That's a long haul, even in a charter. But you're right, the softballs and the tennis and the swimmings, and well, swimming's kind of dual meets, but those back-to-back competitions are going to be, it's going to be crazy.
Right.
It's all about the money, and so we'll see.
What do you think Washington State and Oregon State are going to do? They have to do something. They can't stay independent, can they?
Well, no, I think they're for this upcoming season, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're scheduling either the Big West or the Mountain West. I'm not sure in football. And then I think Oregon State and Washington State are going to try to survive, help the conference to survive, and that may be bringing in other teams like a Boise State or a Gonzaga or whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing names out to build it back up. So it'll be interesting. I think that they have like a 2-year time frame to try to figure some things out. So
Mm,
I really hope that they can figure it out. I mean, the Pac-12 will never be the same, but
right.
if they can survive and try to get some other teams in there.
So I read that you also coached with Geno Auriemma, coaching USA basketball. So, um, what kind of things did you pick up from him while you were spending time on that staff?
Yeah, it was a short stint. It was probably about a 4-week period that we traveled and went to Czech Republic, and but being with him is you understand why he's so successful. There's just things he does that no one else can do. And
Explain for me.
yeah, I mean, just the way he maneuvers, he's like he's a lot like Tara. He's just the maestro at putting all these pieces together, and the expectations and demands, and these kids meeting them, and just his relationships are, it's phenomenal. I think it was an honor to work under him for a short period of time, and he has sustained the excellence too. And there's a method to his madness, and so yeah, just being able to watch him do what he does on a larger scale, and the way he was able to communicate with the young women that were on the USA basketball team, and so forth, and get them to play at a really high level was amazing.
And did anybody surprise you? Please don't use any names, but anybody surprise you with their lack of attention to detail while being like around them and on their staff? And again, please don't say the institution or anything like that, but was there anybody like, how did you get in this position, at such a high level position, somebody that you might have worked for on their staff or anything like that?
I've been so fortunate. I would say every person that I have worked for, I have learned something from and taken away something from. And we were successful. We were successful at the University of Washington. We built that program from the ground up to sell out crowds against Stanford, and all of Seattle embracing the University of Washington. UCLA, my experience was just phenomenal. What a great place to recruit to. University of Oregon, the tradition, and having the backing of the town of Eugene, and University of Utah. I was able to transition into the Pac-12 conference, and the people that I worked with I'm just so lucky that I was at this high level for so long, and I attribute that to the people that I worked with.
And what is it about leadership? What kind of qualities did a lot of these top leaders and professionals that you dealt with had, and how did they show that leadership within the program, and how did it affect you and how you lead now today?
Well, I think first and foremost, they weren't micromanagers. You had
Mm.
responsibilities, and they expected you to be really, really good at those, and to get those things done, get whatever you were responsible for completed, and not have any hiccups or things that we didn't think about, or things that were left on the table, or whatever. So I think being hands off was really, really. I've been lucky. Everyone that I've worked for was hands off, and sort of let me do my thing in the recruiting area or the administrative area and travel and academics and so forth. So I think trusting who they had, the people around them. I think trust was a big thing, loyalty, just trying to make sure everybody was rowing in the same direction. And that's not always easy. And there were times that, that didn't happen. And just knowing that I was doing this for something greater than myself. It wasn't about me. It was about the program. It was about our head coach. It was about how can I make things a little bit easier.
Yeah. And how did some of the best leaders help out the entire staff and make sure that the whole staff was cohesive and everybody was on the same page?
Lots of communication, lots
Mm.
of staff meetings, really diving into what everybody's responsibilities and roles were. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is the communication and the relationship building and the trust, and all of those things. I think, and just being having people that are approachable, that you can go in and say, I have some issues, or I'm struggling, or what do you want with this? Here's our challenge. How would you like me to proceed? Things like that.
Got it. And then what was the communications like if you were having, if there was any difficulties in your job or something like that, or you didn't get a kid recruited, like would the coaches reach out to you and be like, hey, what would that conversation be like?
Well, I think they probably knew before I did if we got a kid or not, because they were
Mm,
the one kind of sealing the deal or finding out if a young woman went to a different place.
mm,
So, and they have to have some involvement along the way.
sure.
We're not gonna get a kid because of an assistant coach. You're not gonna get a kid because they really want to have a relationship also with the head coach, and that's harder these days. But there's got to be some kind of engagement because they're not going to come to your university unless they know or at least have had some kind of engagement with our head coach.
Yep.
So I
Outside of
think they're very aware along the way if what it feels like and what it might look like in the end.
outside of NIL, what would your approach be to getting a kid to come to your institution?
Well, I retired in 2019, so NIL was not a part of that at that point. So
Right.
I didn't have experience with NILs.
But
Um,
if you did, what would be your approach?
uh, Yeah, I don't know because I haven't been a part of it. I don't know all of the behind the scenes that are happening and the conversations that someone might have with a kid that they can offer them this amount of money or that amount of money. Like the last institution I was at was the University of Utah, and all of those kids are driving around in trucks
No,
and
goodness. I did
uh,
hear that. I heard that.
SUVs, football and men's and women's basketball along with gymnastics.
Wow.
So I don't know kind of yeah, I don't know the landscape of that. I know that there are departments on campus who are dealing with that, the NIL collective. Isn't that
Wow.
crazy?
It's insane. It really
Yeah.
is insane. And I don't know if you noticed this, but that there are so many more gambling ads and websites like on almost all podcasts, almost all like the NBA, you see these. It's Bet Online. It's
Yeah.
a MGM bet. It's every there, and I think I don't know this or not, and for sure, because if I start talking, who knows who might come who might come knocking on the door. But I'm thinking a lot of this is being funded by gambling. If you follow what is
Mm,
happening, if you start watching games, you're going to see a bunch of ads for quote unquote responsible gambling. Well, we
wow.
know that gambling is just like a drug as well. Okay, like it might be one of the most addicting drugs, and so now you're getting all these people to responsibly gamble, and just because they put the 1-800 call the 1-800 gambler number, and if you have any problems or issues, but that's the same thing telling a drug addict to go and seek help if they need it. Here's a phone number that you can call when you're already hooked. Like they're not going to call.
Right, right, right.
But I have a feeling that a lot of these collectives would be funded by some of these gaming institutions and things like that. Again, I'm just a guy that runs a podcast and likes to talk to people, but it is extremely prevalent every time you watch something on regarding sports, and like all the podcasts that I listen to, like whether it be Bill Simmons or All the Smoke or The Pivot or you name it, they're always
Mhm.
talking about some sort of gambling site. And
Yeah, that's really
I
interesting.
have a feeling that that's how a lot of this is happening.
Well, you have to wonder where all this money's coming from, right? Is it all coming from the boosters? Probably not. I mean, you have to really wonder, and I don't know, you know, yeah, I don't know, but I would not be surprised. I mean,
Right.
I've read some stories about just the gambling that takes place on college campuses,
Right.
um, and student athletes getting involved there. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was an outside entity that was having a impact too.
Yeah. What is sacred anymore, Willette? I have no clue.
Oh my God.
Um, but
Yeah.
what I do like is you've taken all your experiences and you have now you've retired from the, coaching and being on campuses and things like that, but you've also shifted directions to help other people. So talk about your new initiative and what you've been able to do and how you've been able to help young student athletes.
Yeah, so I really dove into. I continued to invest in the student athlete, and I developed my business and a program around high school athletes, student athletes transitioning to college athletics. And I don't think that families really are aware of how important and critical that transition piece is. I think that many parents um, sort of leave it to chance that their daughter's going to have an easy transition. But in reality, it's such a big loss for a young woman. All that they've experienced being under their parents' roof for 17 years now, they're going away from home, being a big fish in a little high school pond, having these relationships, their best friends, their social and the social groups that they've been a part of, and it's a huge loss for them. So when they get on a college campus, all these changes and this new beginning and in their identity and who they are as a young woman outside of being a student athlete and all of these things that really play a part in their transition that families do not think about. And so I decided I wanted to address that. I wanted to be a part of helping a young woman or a young man get prepared for all the demands that they're going to face on their college campus. So I took critical topics, I developed a program around that. It's an 8-week program. And then after the 8-week program, I offer 8 months of support once a young woman or a young man gets on their college campus for their parents, for them to just be a resource and to be a part of their village, because we all know it does take a village. And so, that transitional phase really begins with acknowledging the losses, being aware of what they're coming in contact with, being able to at some point find a neutral zone and let go of the past, and then being able to really dive in and find their way on their college campus and create new values and attitudes and habits and so forth.
Wow, that's great. And so how do the families find you, and how does that all work out for them to gain access to your services?
Yeah, so I have my website is Next Step Transitional Coaching. I do have an email address, and it's nextstepww@gmail.com. My business phone number is 541-632-3320. And I have consultations all the time about and talking to families about what it is they're looking for. And I do have an arm of my company that helps a young woman find their perfect fit too, finds a place to play. And we do an assessment of who they are and what's important to them and what it is they're looking for. And then we guide them a year-long recruiting journey. And then it's a 8-month, well, probably about 10 months of transitional work, 8 months in the program, and then 8 months of support.
And then
So
ideally,
we do.
when would a parent slash student athlete start to look to get these services from you? The earlier, the
Yeah,
better, or
the earlier the
because
better, especially with the recruiting piece. We don't. We've have some clients who have reached out to us in their senior year, and that's quite late. So ninth grade, 10th grade, definitely by their junior year. And we can even implement the transitional strategies into a young woman so they can develop some good habits in high school before they go away. Um, definitely by their junior year at the latest, but
and,
preferably by their sophomore year.
and do you help them with their on the court production as well?
We don't do any skill work. I think we're virtual, so we've got clients all over the country. And I
Sure.
know that they probably are being inundated with opportunities to play AAUs and get some skill development. We will talk through AAU programs and what's best and what to look for and questions to ask and so forth.
And speaking of AAU, what do you recommend for a young athlete? Do you try to go for the shoe brand team and maybe not get a whole lot of minutes, but you're going to be in front of coaches, even though you might not be in the games? Should you be on a more local team that's going to allow you the opportunity to grow and get better, work on your game? Like, where would you put a kid? From your expertise in knowing what you know with all the years of experience that you have?
I think it would depend, Chris, on sort of what they wanted, right? In what they visioned for their college journey, or if they have any desire to even play in college, or they just want to play use because it's fun. Um, I think there's something to be said for the shoe companies, but if you're going to be the 13th on the bench and not get any minutes, what is that doing for you and for your opportunity? Maybe they have just a level in the same AAU program right below that number one team that you'll get more minutes, and you're still going to the same places that the number one team is going. Um, or you play locally and send out film and you get in touch with college coaches, and you may be sleeper. You may be someone that's, a diamond in the rough, or you may be someone that, nobody knows about but could fit into many of different places. So I think it just depends on the individual and their talent level and what they're looking for. So I don't think there's one blanket answer for that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's a case by case basis. You
Yes.
can tell certain people that you shouldn't eat meat, but it might be good for that person, or somebody that
Right.
can't really eat meat, and being a vegan is more appropriate to what their body needs. And I think that that's important. Not everything, my prescription isn't your prescription, and
Sure.
your prescription isn't everybody else's prescription. So you have to do what's best for you. Take inventory of all the information. Once you have all the information, you can make an informed decision about what it is that you want to do, and then how you're going to accomplish it. And one of the things I like to do is reverse engineer. Okay, I want to be a college basketball player. All right, what does that look like? And a lot of people don't really understand the ingredients that you need to make it to be a college basketball player. Okay, what time do I have to wake up? Do I have to work out in the morning? Do I have to get extra shots in the morning? Do I have to watch my diet? Can I eat Chick-fil-A every day? Or probably shouldn't, because that's
Hmm.
not going to help me and my body, not help me sleep, not help me recover, not help me grow the correct way. And so all these factors need to be uh, need to go into this whole formula of what that is. And I'm so glad that you're helping these people with those sort of decisions. You already talked about your contact information and phone number. Is there anything else that we can put out there for you before we jump off?
Yeah, I think it's just really having parents understand that the transition is not as easy as they think. It's a huge loss for their daughter or their son. And we've all heard the nightmare stories of getting on a college campus, right? Whether it's a social pressure or the demands and you're no longer a big fish, learning to advocate for yourself, the time management piece, they're going to have to become independent. So the
Mhm.
more independency a parent can provide them, the better it will be once they get on their college campus. I remember talking to a college coach when I was doing research, and he was telling me that a kid's mom was calling him every morning to make sure he woke up. He had a test, something happened with the mother, she slept in or had an appointment or something, and he missed the test. And he was pissed at her. So there's 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 an independency that needs to happen, and parents, yeah, they need to let go probably sooner than later, or at least give their young woman, young daughter or young son some responsibilities, and not always come to the rescue or be a helicopter parent, and allow them to figure it out on their own. And those are all a lot of the things that we really address. So yeah,
Yeah.
diving in and making sure they're ready. And there's so many phases to that transition. Um, so as long as they can understand that it's not as easy as they think, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Quick story. My son bought some new sunglasses. You know how all these kids are wearing
Yeah, yeah.
these glasses, and he swore that he gave them to me, and I knew he did not give them to me. We're after baseball practice, and he's like, "Dad, you got the case. You got the case." He's getting all frantic. I said, "Son, I don't have it." And I did not take it. I had your bag. So I did grab your bag, but you grabbed those. And so he's frantic and da da da. So we go out to my car. And finally he sees in the seat next to his seat is the case. And I said, I told you. And that goes to show you, look, you take care of your stuff so you always know where it's at. Don't blame me. Don't blame your mom. Don't blame anybody for your lack of attention to detail. That's on you. And so if you want to take these glasses to school, we're telling you you probably shouldn't, because you don't want to lose them. And if you lose them, we're not getting them again. And if you're able to make sure that you maintain them and keep them keeping a place where you know where they're at, fine. But that's going to be on you. And that's kind of how we're not gentle parents, but we're not unloving either. And I think you need some sort of balance of both. And I think your comment about the parents being the ones to facilitate these sort of interactions and conversations and getting the information, but then allowing their child to kind of go through the process of what this is going to be. And you're not going to be able to hold their hand when they're on campus and they're confronted with a situation where they're at a party and they're offered something and they might not want to do it, but like you said, the social pressure to feel involved with this community that I just want to feel involved with now, you might not have the social cues to be able to say no at that point in time, or something that's going on that you might not feel is right, but you can't stand up for yourself because you just don't have those social cues. So I think what you're doing is great, and this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm just so glad to meet you. Your wealth of knowledge, and I learned so much from our conversation, and I hope all the listeners do too.
Yeah, well, thanks, Chris. I do appreciate you having me on. I'm so glad you responded to my request, so thank you for that. And I appreciate what you're doing at the high school level and helping your kids to get ready if college is what they want, and with your AU program, your AU program and being at the high school. So thank you for what you do. And if any of your kids, need any help in the recruiting process or the transition process, please reach out to me. Don't hesitate to do that.
Definitely. Stay on after the outro, but here we go. Here's the outro, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond the Buckets podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share the show with your friends. And until next time, take care.